Tonight, however, we have a lovely panel of people here. I'm just going to let them throw the microphone open and introduce themselves. Let's start with Kristian, who you know is one of the executives here in ASSAP.
Hello there, so my name is Kristian. I guess I am the producer, should we say, of our fantastic webinars that we put out on a weekly basis. This now is year 4 going into year 5. Of course, these have quite a following, as they do. So I have a broad spectrum interest in many topics of the paranormal and the topics that come under that umbrella, whether it be UAP, ufology, certainly the hauntings, or more the kind of the psychological conditions that allow people to be put into conditions where they could be suggested they might be having weird kind of things happening to them. And but generally, I take an approachable, grounded perspective, although some of the ideas and topics I discuss can be a little bit out there. So I think it's a bit of a fun mix the way I approach the paranormal. So that's perhaps enough for me. So handing over to the next member of our panel today, how about we jump over to Karin Beasant. Karin, introduce yourself, darling, and tell us all about who you are.
My name's Karin. I'm an investigator, and I've been looking after the famous Jamaica Inn down in Cornwall for a few years. I also am passionate about helping heritage locations open up to the paranormal in an ethical way to protect its history and its brand. And I dabble in lots of other things as well because I just love life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karin. Let's move over to Mike Benbough-Jackson, who will explain his participation today.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm officially Dr. Mike Benbough-Jackson of Liverpool John Moores University History Department. Obviously, historian, strong family history of weirdness. I'm interested in the weird in many of its manifestations. Clearly approach it from a very historiographic historian's kind of perspective in terms of going for the primary sources of what are actually out there and trying to make something of them, contextualize them, and see what else we can hope to understand. So I'm divided in half, really. Part of me is a great open-minded regarding the family side of things, but also trying to look for the evidence where we can in the historical record. I'm fortunate as well that I'm lucky to be able to have a quick plug for I'm very happy about this, article coming out in the Fortean Times next month on the Bandicoot invasion. So a little bit out there, but yeah.
Thank you very much, Mike. Most of you know me, Caroline McKendrick-Gibson. I've added that on the end now so that you don't forget who I am now that I've changed my name. I have a history of being an ex-police officer and working in government, and then I've moved on to being a sports therapist when I left that role. Now I have had another change where I've stumbled into the world of writing and research, something that my dear friend Karin convinced me to do. So it's all her fault for anybody else who's read my articles. So research for me is paramount when I'm investigating claims of the paranormal, and it's very clear that you have to have clear evidence to be able to get the history right. So that's my view within the paranormal. Am I a believer? I want so much to believe, and I don't disbelieve, so I guess you call me a skeptical believer. I tend to see if I can put it to the test of questioning and see if I can debunk things first. But yes, I've had a lot of things that's happened to me that I don't have an explanation for. So tonight, I'm very excited that we have Dr. Ian Rubenstein with us. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Ian Rubenstein. His bio reads, "The world of medicine collided with the world of mediumship for a family doctor physician. Ian, one morning when his dead grandfather dropped by for a chat, he worked out that he had this skill, I guess, or gift. I'm not sure what he will class it as. This strange experience stretched his worldview to a breaking point and sent him off on a mad dash through territory populated by mediums, psychic, poltergeists, and other ghost hunters. I'm sure many of us can actually add that to our curriculum vitae as well. His unexpected journey ultimately led Ian to see how far he could develop his own psychic intuitions. So, Dr. Ian D. Rubenstein is a UK doctor who works in Enfield, North London. Since training as a medium, he has attempted to use his mediumistic skills he's learnt in his medical work as a primary care physician. And for more information about his work and his book, please look for him online under drianrubenstein.com. I'm sure that we can put the link up a bit later for you to find him and his bio on his website. Welcome, Ian.
It's good to be here. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you said it all, really. In terms of what I used to say I'm Britain's psychic GP. Now I say I'm Britain's probably oldest fledgling medium, because I've been training for the last 20 years or 21 years now, and I still can't quite get the nerve to go out full time and go on platform. I think platform for mediumship is the hardest thing to do. It's very nerve-wracking. I've done a little bit of it. But I mainly
just tell us a little bit about how you came into this then, and what happened with the first
I think I gave you the story, but in a nutshell, I was going through a very difficult family situation. My wife and I had been ejected from the family, and I'd realized that there was a family psychopathology going on, probably due to my maternal grandfather, who was a gambler. And so I did some research onto that and interviewed my uncles and aunts, and was thinking about this guy very much, feeling quite miserable. And then one day, one of my patients came into my room and started giving me a message from him, grandfather I never met, which was stunning. I mean, I didn't expect that at all. I'd known this guy for 19 years. I hadn't known he could do this. He kept it secret because he didn't want me to think that he was flaky. But the stuff that he told me was quite amazingly accurate. And then he said that I should be doing, well, actually, he said his spirit guide, William, who was his boss at the BBC, who when he died, he became his spirit guide, which I thought was crazy. Said I should be doing this. I said, what? He said, speaking to spirit. I didn't even know what spirit meant in those days. I mean, it was completely off the wall for me. And then from that point onwards, I met just kept on running into people who kept on giving me messages or pointing me in different directions. And eventually I ended up sitting in a spiritualist church in the largest open circle in North London, in Walthamstow, with a bunch of Cockneys, training as a medium. And my language has never recovered. When you're training with a bunch of Cockneys, I'm afraid you end up effing and blinding like the rest of them. So there we go. So it's ruined my language, but opened my mind. It was professionally, well, I mean, I started then giving messages to patients. I mean, became a space cadet. I mean, Rubenstein's third law of the paranormal is that everybody becomes a space cadet, most recover. I think I might have recovered, but some don't. And I looked, spurred to Ian Rubenstein. I was the guy at the cocktail party, or with a celery stick, getting into a corner, telling about my experiences. So yeah, it was an interesting time. Professionally, I thought I was going to be drummed out of the profession, but actually quite the reverse. My professional life became amazing. I mean, it deepened. My relationships with my patients deepened. I ended up with a lot more friends, very interesting people. Some of them I can see here in this meeting, by the way. Nice to see you. Opened my social circle, but I never got abducted by aliens. I mean, I've always been interested in UFOs, not mediumship. Mediumship sort of grabbed me, but actually, I'd have thought I'd been more likely to be abducted by aliens, but it hasn't happened, which is most disappointing. But I hope it does. Anyway, so that's me really. So I managed to integrate it into my professional life, and my patients accept it as something I do. When they can see me, it's very hard to get to an appointment with GPs now. We can talk about that. So here I am. Oh, by the way, the good thing is, of course, I work in Enfield, which is the Enfield poltergeist, and even better, I look after the grandson of Bill the spirit that came through the Enfield poltergeist, and it's an interesting story I can tell you about that. So yeah, my provenance is great, but I mean the UFOs. I mean I've seen one, but they just keep away, which is a big shame. But there we are. That's me.
Well, my head's already going in the direction of you need to get us the contact details of the grandson so that we can have them on and ask questions and further, find out some information that isn't prevalent on in the wider world. That'd be great. I'll start off the ball rolling before I hand over to the UFO person to speak to you about that. So, Kristian, you'll be up next, my lovely. My main question to start the ball rolling is, for those that don't know, how do you train to be a medium?
Who's that for? Me?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
for you.
How do you train to be? Well, I mean, of course, I didn't know. Well, the big question is, are you born with it, or is it something you can train at? Now, I think there must be a range of human abilities in all things. I mean, I couldn't kick. I can kick a ball, but I could, I can't play football. I'm useless at it. And then you've got virtuosos. I mean, I actually looked after the patient who was David Beckham's primary school teacher, and said to me, I said, "What was he like?" He said, "Oh, he could kick a ball, all right." And he was very good at it from the word go. Give me a ball, I'd fall over it. So I guess there's a range of human ability. I think I always had it, but you can definitely train. I mean, and if we look at the remote viewing, the Munro Institute, Steve Greer's CE5 initiative, it's all these psionic stuff they do in the US Army. There are ways of training, and the way spiritualists do it is simply you go into a circle, you work with a bunch of people, and you see what you can pick up. You go through guided meditation, and if you stick at it, and if you suspend your disbelief, most people will be able to pick up something, I believe. And then you have to, and once you get that, the next thing is because you're really working through your unconscious mind. I mean, so spirit contact occurs at the depths of your mind, and then percolates up. And as it percolates up, it carries up a lot of imagery and stuff that comes with you. So you get this whatever the message is, it's overlaid with your own assumptions, images, and everything like that. So you then have to work out how your mind's working, and you engage you develop a language with your guides, whatever the guides are. And that's another interesting idea. These spirit entities that are said to help you, and I've had experience with guides, and you end up trying to get a language, often a symbolic language. I mean, I don't hear a lot. I have imagery. So you end up with symbolic languages, which you get to know what they're trying to communicate. For instance, if I see a chessboard in my mind, I know that someone has to be very strategic, often at work. Things like this. You end up with a symbolic communication, and which is different for different people. And that's where it comes in. That's where you have to hone it. So there's some native stuff, but it's like 99% perspiration, maybe 1% inspiration, I would say.
So how do you bring the scientific into this? What do you do to draw the line between qualitative and quantitative to find out what it is that you're hearing?
Yeah, well, this is interesting. Well, I don't. I decided to stick that to one side. I don't. The thing about medicine, and when GPs see drug reps or see drug reps, they blind you with science. It's often junk science. And I decided that a lot of the science that's presented is junk science. And I'm not a scientist. I'm scientifically informed, I'm scientifically trained, but I am not a scientist. I am an experiencer. And although I've had a very scientific education, as a child I just read science fiction. I've had really very little humanities training. But I've come to the conclusion that this is actually a humanities thing. I'm not a scientist, and I think what I've noticed is if you start thinking about it too much, I do think about it, but if you overthink, it goes. So I think you need to. For me, it's a personal inner exploration as well. I mean, I have got various ideas, but I mean, most scientists would laugh them out of court. I mean, you're talking about other realms, other dimensions, materialism versus non-materialism, those sort of things. But when I'm as a doctor, when I'm with a patient giving a message, it's a very human thing.
Thank you. It was a great answer. We're going to move over. Kristian can pose the next question for you, Ian.
Yeah, Ian. So thank you very much for coming along tonight. I a little time actually within these spiritual development circles, as it were, born of that curiosity. I wanted to know what was going on. I had mediumistic spiritualist friends, and they would always recommend me to go along to what in Nottingham is like Canning Circus, which is like a major development circle here for the SNU. And I spent some time there, and I saw some things that led me to question more about what's going on in our world and how things happen and work. So the one question I'd like to put to you is, how do you balance that kind of intuitive experience, that kind of first level information that's coming through, that whether it be from spirit or somewhere else? How do you deal with that and the kind of rational thoughts that are going on at the same time? How have you learned to filter them out and say what's mine and what perhaps is from the other side?
Yeah, very difficult. And I still get it wrong. I think most mediums would say that it's very hard. I was in my circle the other day, and one of the women who's just trying, she was having trouble with this. When you first start off, it's very, very difficult. And you start off in baby steps. When you get to, I mean, I've been doing this now for some time, so I think I'm probably quite experienced, but you still get it wrong. I mean, there's a couple of problems. First of all, how do you know what's from them and what's from you? Well, it's all from you. I mean, like I said, it all bubbles up from you. So whatever you're getting is coming from you. And I think first, when you get into this frame of mind, you have to just accept that you are using think of it, you know how people use tarot cards, okay? And they look at them and they see pictures. Sometimes they go through the formal way of looking at it, or they look at the pictures and see how it inspires them. So you're using something external, or reading tea leaves. You know, what do they mean? It's just an external prop. You're actually using your mind and the imagery in it in that way. It's a form of divination, I suppose, but where your intent is to communicate with deceased loved ones, whoever they may be. So you have to accept that everything that's coming through whilst you're in the frame is hopefully coming from spirit. It may not be, but you hope it is. So what you have to do is interpret it. So it's a bit like, how can I put it? I'm not a fisherman, but my friend Neil is a fisherman, and he said you cast the line out with hope, and you just like say very still, and you get a nibble. And then when you get a nibble, you gently reel in the fish. It's a bit like that mentally. You cast the line out and you just feel something. It's often in the back of your mind. It's like a little nibble, something tugging away. It might be an image or something. And then you develop it. And then with me, what happens is that it'll often be an object. And if I would give it out and say to someone, look, I think I'm with you. I'm seeing this in my mind. Can you take it? And if they say, yeah, it might mean something, then you've established a link. And once you've established that link, you can then get more images. And what I've noticed is, in my mind, the images are often, they start out dim, but then they glow brighter and brighter. And sometimes they get very bright and very large, and then I have to give the image out. Not always. Sometimes it's just a feeling sort of here. But it's very hard. This is the question I used to ask when I started. Now I know what it feels like. But it's very, very hard to describe. Yet you actually have to go through it and try it yourself. I'm not even sure that there are adequate words to explain it. But fundamentally, you are trying to develop a language, and that would be pictures as well as words. In my case, mainly pictures. Where you're trying to communicate with your unconscious mind and or guides. Now, because the other question is, are your guides separate from your unconscious mind? And we can discuss that. I mean, I don't know. Certainly my guides have had an impact on the physical world. There's no doubt about that in terms of coincidences. But I mean, you know, some people say that our unconscious minds can do that anyway. At the end of the day, I think the way I see it is I'm working within the spiritualist framework when I'm doing this work, and I will accept it like I will accept any other framework, not necessarily hang on to it. I entertain it. It's the most useful framework when you're doing that sort of work, but it might not be the most useful thing for all of this phenomena.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Karin, would you like to ask Ian a question?
Absolutely fascinating so far. But one thing that's always I've wondered, in 2020, I was in hospital with acute pancreatitis, and I was heavily sedated with tramadol and morphine. And I knew in my muddled state the ghosts and the dog and the cat walking past my bed wasn't real. But with the rise of medication given to people now, do you think more experiencing ghosts that are not ghosts?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm actually in a paranormal discussion group where this often comes up. The first thing, I mean, I'm not an investigator. The first thing investigators often ask me is, look, they're on these drugs. Could they be having an effect? And yes, of course, they can. I mean, if you have an acute confusional state, people can have all sorts of things. I remember being very sick as a child, and seeing some weird stuff. I think the thing about psychic phenomena and these experiences are they're often they're not confused, I would say. I mean, certainly when you're working as a medium, you are aware of these images and you're trying to sift through them. I mean, there's a lot of mental effort going on there. It's not like this sort of confused state you have with morphine or a fever. It's not a fever dream. And people do say that, I mean, like with near-death experiences, for instance, that they feel more real than reality itself. And of course, there's some, if you look at the latest brain studies, I think they've been using psychedelics where people have, is it MDMA? But they have, the machine elves. They look at the brain, and people say, well, the brain should be sort of functioning at a rapid rate of fire, but it isn't. It's actually a lot calmer. So the question is the brain acting as a filter for reality rather than generating this stuff? There's certainly a qualitative difference. I mean, it's not hard for a doctor to see a acute confusional state with someone. I mean, that's pretty obvious, or it's drugs. But I would say psychic phenomena is different from my experience and the people I know.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Mike, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Well, when you mentioned somebody having a boss as a spirit guide, I thought, oh God, I don't really want to. I hope I don't. Not necessarily my present one, I have to say, but yeah, some in the past, I suppose. But that led me to think about, do we have like a typology, like types of spirit guides? I mean, quite familiar with the kind of Native American imagery, but yeah, have you got any experiences?
Yeah, well, let me tell you a lovely story. So I when I was at Vestry Road Spiritualist Church, there was a very good medium called, in my book, I've called him Kevin Wright. His real name was Keith, actually, but there were so many Keiths in my life, I had to change his name. So Keith, he was a very good medium, but he's very impatient, and he also had a bit of an ego, so he got very upset if people didn't do exactly what he wanted. And I remember one day, he said, right, we're all going to meet our guides. We're all going to meet our monk. We've all got a monk. And one of the women in the group said, oh, Keith, I don't want to. I haven't got a monk. I've got a nun. No, you've got a monk. You can't have a nun. You've got to have a monk. So funnily enough, I'd already met my monk. So this is a fairly standard sort of, would you call them, psychopomp, I suppose, a guide to the spiritual realms. So yeah, so common tropes are monks, nuns, sisters of mercy. What else did you? Oh yeah, the lovely one, the African warriors. I've got one of them as well, actually. What else have I got? Oh, I've got an alien, I think. But yeah, but I mean, so the question, and I've got an Inuit guide, and I've got loads. But the thing is, question is, are they real? So as a spiritualist, you have to challenge your guides. And bugger me, to use my French, I had some experiences which are quite amazing. So I can say that my principal guide, Nestor, is this monk. He claims to be a 9th century Syrian monk in a Nestorian monastery. And he said that he calls me little brother. He says that I was the administrator, fussy little administrator of the monastery, which is why I like office equipment now and computers. But he actually proved himself, I mean, by a series of startling coincidences, which I've told before, I won't go into it now, which is quite amazing. Linked with libraries, but just something which was so obviously synchronous that I could not ignore it. And likewise with my African guide. I haven't got a red Indian guide. I wouldn't mind one. But the big question is, what are they? Are they part of me? And the way I saw it was this. I mean, because when I was starting on this, because I was interacting with these entities with like voices in my head, and I had to come to some terms. What was I dealing with? And I came to the conclusion is that maybe these guides, if they are a disconnected part of me, would they know that? So if they're like, on my computer right now, we've got Zoom. I've also got Word running and Excel. They're all running on the same hardware. But whether or not they can speak to each other is a matter. They're all separate programs. So it's just an analogy. I'm not saying I am software. But maybe they are a rogue piece of my cognitive software running on my wetware. And they think they're real. It doesn't matter. And they've got permission to go off and do the stuff that I wouldn't be doing. Okay, they come with histories and stories and they can do stuff. And often with guides, when people have looked into them, there's no evidence that they ever existed. I think Leslie Flint's guide, Mickey, I think they have found evidence that he existed. But often they don't. So we're in this liminal space of spiritual entities, psychological entities. Where do you begin and you end? It's very interesting. And I don't actually think we've got the knowledge or the language to describe it. I think who comes closest is Jung, actually. I think you've really got to have at least a nodding familiarity with Jung to make sense of that.
Yes, definitely one of the go-tos for us all, isn't he?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
invaluable, whether it's UFOs or anything else for that matter,
Absolutely,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah. Just one follow-on question, if it's okay. You're mentioning Nestor acknowledging some kind of almost like a past life thing going on there as well in its own way. My own experience, I mean, I've never had anything like spirit guides. I've had imaginary children, friends as a child, which were very vivid and I still remember them now in some ways. And again, they're associated with past lives in some cases. Did you get any feeling from any other of your spirit guides? There was a
Well, yeah, actually, no, this is interesting because I don't like the idea of reincarnation. My wife's Indian and she's quite cool with it. I hate the idea. I don't want to come back. You see, the part of me, the Ian here, the ego, because I put the me into mediumship. That's why I say, all mediums say they've got no ego, but I say I put the me into mediumship. I don't want. I mean, I don't want the thought of me, Ian, not being there. Okay, or I don't like the idea. Even if this soul persists, if my autobiographical details have gone, do I actually still exist? But the other thing that I think of course, is that actually a lot of my life I don't remember anyway, and it doesn't matter. So I'm in two minds about that. But as a child, I had an image going way back to the age of 3 of walking down a wooden paneled corridor. I'm looking down on my arms and I've got these loose sleeves that on the shirt, like men would wear foppish men would wear in the 18th century. And I'm going into a room and I'm opening these doors and I can see 2 men dressed similarly looking over a globe of the world. And I've got this nautical feel for it. And I've had that since about the age of 3. And one of the things that my African guide told me was that we were on a ship off the Dutch East Indies in South Africa. In those days, there was a big battle. I don't know, but that's always been there. I've tried to get to the point of so it started off just as a door and opening and nothing there. I managed to get to the point where the door opens. I can see these men looking over a wooden globe of the world in about the 18th century type vibe. But that's all I've got from that. The other thing I had was with the monastery, the Nestorian monastery. When I got my first telescope, when I was obsessed with telescopes as a child, and I got I must have been about 9 or 10. I remember looking through it at the garden next door, and as I looked through it, I could see what looked like cloisters in a monastery. And I thought, what is that? And it wasn't that. And eventually I couldn't see it, but I always wondered what that was. I think that may have been something. Yeah, as to what we really are, I have had a near-death experience, which I will tell here. So this was, I may have already told it the last one, forgive me if I have. This is when I had a tonsillectomy. I was 9 years old and I had my tonsils out and I bled from the tonsillar bed where they cut it. So I had to go down and have it cauterized. I was vomiting blood, I was quite ill. And as I went under the anesthetic, I found myself standing in a dark tunnel, the classic dark ribbed tunnel, and something was being extruded from my abdomen, like above my navel, right here, a very thick stalk, like molten glass, and it was being extruded from me, and it was gently rotating down this tunnel. I heard a sort of a noise, a humming or buzzing noise or ringing noise, and this thing just drifted off into the distance. And on the end of it was a very, very bright little, it looked like an LED light, very bright, like a bright spark. And I knew that actually, although my body was at this end of the tunnel, and this thing was floating down the tunnel, and it's curving to the left, I actually was that little bright spark. Remember, it went round to the left, and then I woke up. Now, at the time, I thought, well, I was 9. How old did I think? I didn't know what to make of it. I remember being told, this is what you really are, a spark on the end of a stalk. And I mean, I may have told this before, but I actually worked in that hospital 17 years later. I was doing gynecology, and I had to treat someone as an emergency D&C, and the normal operating theatre was closed, so I had to sort of arrange to have it done in the temporary operating theatre, which I'd never been in before. And I followed the operating department assistant down into she led me through to the new operating theatre. And as I walked into it, I just felt like I'd been poleaxed. And she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I've been here before." She said, "You can't possibly have been. It's the old pediatric ENT theatre." Well, of course I had been, and that's where I had my experience. The interesting thing is, first of all operating theatres look the same. I was 9, and you get anaesthetised in the side ward, an antechamber, before you go into the main thing anyway. So I thought that was quite significant. And I used to tell that story a lot before I had other stories to tell. But so, yeah, I don't really want to come back, though. But who knows? Maybe I don't get a choice.
Thank you for that. I'm going to run through a couple of questions from the audience participation that we've got going on at the moment. And then I'll run back through the panel again. So first question is from Julie Elizabeth Boyd. She said, "How do you know that all these different guides or spirits are not the same entity playing games or pretending to be more than one?"
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I don't. But it doesn't help me when I'm doing the work to think in that way. So I mean, there's two mindsets. One is the practical mindset, giving a message and trying to get it, which is very, very important for a medium. I mean, you're trying to give proof of life after death, and whether that is proof is another matter. But you're trying to give proof of continuing existence. In my case, I'm quite happy if I'm just giving proof that I'm picking up information which I shouldn't have access to. I think that's pretty wonderful. But ideally, you're giving proof, and as a doctor, giving comfort to people. So when I'm with a patient, I'm using mediumship with a patient, which I do, not very often, but I do. Then my chief role is to make them feel better, to help them with their bereavement, and it does help with bereavement counselling. And from that point of view, I don't care where these entities come from, as long as it gives comfort and healing. And to be honest, I would actually stick a bone through my nose and do a dance around the surgery if it helped the person, because that, as a doctor, that's what your primary aim is. So you're not a scientist, you're informed by science, but you're actually meant to be helping people and to get them through life, and ideally be a healer. Now, they could be the same entity, they could be me. They may not know who they are. They may be like Alexa, Alexa, who's appears, or Siri, some sort of advanced AI thing which we just drum up. They may be thought forms. I mean, take your pick, choose your framework, but you have to choose a framework and stick with it when you're doing the work. So, I mean, if you're doing ceremonial magic, these are spirits. If you're trying to do CE5 contact, these are extraterrestrials, probably. But if you're doing mediumship, then you're working with spirit guides, and hopefully within the framework where you can pick up deceased relatives. How do you know that these are really deceased relatives? I mean, you subscribe to the super psi hypothesis, you're just tapping into the Akashic records and a huge database, and you could maybe that's all we are. But then maybe that's what reality is. So at some point, you've got to stop asking questions and do the work.
Yeah, I get that totally. Leading on from that question, a point you made a minute ago, you said our memory is very vague, what we can remember, part
Yeah.
of it. And that's right. I myself have friends say, "Oh, can you remember that time we did that?" And it's just like I've got dementia. And I'm thinking, did we? Did we do that? So when spirit comes along, how do they know which memories you remember to give you to connect you?
Well, how do they know which memory? So basically, so the memories, what you're trying to do is to give a message that means something to the individual, the sitter. Let's call them the sitter, someone you're sitting with. So having established the link with them, what you've got is a flow. Hopefully, I think what's happening is a flow of information between you, the sitter, the spirit guide, and the communicating spirit. So the idea of the spirit guide, as I see it, or what you're trying to do is the spirit guide is trying to, if we think in terms of frequency, we imagine spirits on a higher frequency, one on a lower frequency. You're trying to match frequencies. So you are trying to raise your vibratory rate. At the same time, the spirit guide is trying to bring the vibratory rate of the communicator down. Hopefully, you meet in the middle. And then what has to happen is that the communicator has to give a message via the spirit guide to you, which then means something to the sitter. So, and it's very complicated. So what will happen with me? I'll give you a concrete example. When I first started opening up, I was at the Arthur Finley Centre. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was with the famous medium Paul Jacobs, and I was looking at this woman, and I saw a friend of mine called Jane standing behind her, and I could describe her, and then I burst into tears. Not good form. I got told off for that. But actually, the woman I described, when I gave the description, I said, I see my friend Jane. And he said, well, just describe her. When I described her, the woman said, you've described my mum. And when I burst into tears, apparently she'd had a stroke and became emotionally labile, and she would burst into tears. So what happened is that I had got an image in my mind of my friend Jane, because that correctly described the sitter's mother. So that's what we're dealing with, layers upon layers that need interpreting. So the big problem, I'm sorry if I've gone off half cut, but one of the big problems mediums have is it real or is it symbolic? So I mean, yesterday I was in a circle. What day was it? Tuesday, and I was giving this message to a woman, and suddenly I saw frogs. I thought, frogs? What are the frogs about? Completely non sequitur. Oh, all these frogs. I think, what is it? Is it something about a creature underwater? Are they trying to work at symbolism? So I just said, look, I'm seeing frogs. What do they mean? And she said, oh, it's okay. I've got a frog collection at home. I've got loads of ornaments. And I thought, oh my God, that wasn't symbolic, but it could have been symbolic. And that's very handy, actually, as mediums, because when you're out on the platform, sometimes one cop out is, well, if they can't take it, it must be symbolic, which is always a good let up. You try not to do that, but I mean, one is tempted. It's quite technically as I'm describing it, it sounds quite technically difficult. Actually, what happens, of course, is when you're doing it, hopefully it just flows. It becomes quite natural. I mean, like, how do you talk? You got to find the words, this, that, the other. It's difficult when you're a baby, but once you get into it, you just do it. Trouble is, when you start thinking about it, then you start falling over it.
I think you've covered a couple of the questions that we've had come in about frequencies and explaining something that's happened to you that was quite intuitive. So I'll ask one more, then we'll go back to the panel. What would you say to doctors or scientists who are curious about exploring intuition or spirituality?
I'd say go for it. I think one of the problems with medicine is that even more so nowadays is the obsession with science. In the old days, medicine You could go to medical school with A levels in history and whatever, no science A levels. You could do what's called first MB, which was like a science catch-up. You had a series of doctors who were they could handle science, but intellectually more rounded. Now, I mean, I was straight. I had to do four A levels. They're all science to medical school, and then it's really, I mean, 72 exams in 2 years. It's bang, 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 bang. It's very, very intense. It's even more so now. And then when you get into medicine, there's no time. You're dead on your feet. You're sleeping half the time. And now, of course, they're all stuck in front of computers. It's all done by pro forma. So that's. It's all very logical. It's all very direct. It's all very narrow. It's all very left brain. What I say to doctors is, and every doctor knows that intuition counts. In fact, I was working for the Transforming Cancer Services team in London for about 10 years, and I was designing forms that were used for suspected cancer. One of my obsessions from being a fussy little monk in the 9th century is forms. So I designed these forms that every GP had to fill out. They sent someone to the hospital. And these were on it were the criteria which you had to tick to send someone to hospital with suspected cancer. And one of them was, if your gut feeling, we decide to put that on the form, go with your gut feeling. So every experienced person in any field of human endeavor gets gut feeling because, you put it all together. What I found interesting about mediumship was that it actually, learning to be a medium trained my intuition. Now, I did not expect that. So that's what you're doing. You're actually training your intuition. You're letting the stuff bubble up, and then examining it. So you let the stuff bubble up. You take it seriously. You don't dismiss it. And you think, what can this mean? And actually, that's really useful. As a GP back in the day, I was in the 1980s when I trained, there was a penchant for what's called Balint training. Michael Balint was a Hungarian psychotherapist who worked at the Tavistock Centre before it went dark. And he looked at and he took a psychodynamic view to the view of the consultation. And you'd come to a group and you say, I had this difficult patient, and the psychotherapist who was in there leading the group was saying, how did the patient make you feel? Well, what do you mean make me feel? I felt angry. Let's look at these feelings. Could this possibly be from the patient? So this is using your intuitive side. It's a whole new way of doing it that I was trained actually in my Balint group, and even more when I would join my mediumship group. But most doctors aren't actually, and I think that's what it has to offer medicine. I will say that there's lots of doctors who are interested in it. In fact, I know there's a former consultant from one hospital, Shillingford Hospital in Wales. She's just Nona Blackwell. She's got a book coming out soon on the 7th of February about her. It's called From Medic to Mystic, which I'm really looking forward to reading. So she's... and when I was working for the Transforming Cancer Services team, my book had just come out, and I got a lot of doctors sidling up to me saying, we don't normally talk about this, but tell me about your experience. It's very interesting. So I think there is an undercurrent of interest, but people are frightened to talk about it.
Going back to something you said earlier, let's run with your analogy of different types of psychic inputs being software. What's your software of choice? Have you tried psychometry?
Psychometry. We try everything. Try psychometry, divination, dowsing. I mean, I've got a whole. I can't show you here, but if I could move my camera, I have in my hall a cabinet full of stuff that I dowsed for. Long before I got into this, I moved into my house. It was a new build. Garden was unmade, and my wife had a terrible migraine. And I was bored, so I thought I had the urge to douse. So I got the old L rods, the bent coat hanger. Well, got in the garden, got nothing. And I thought, how old was I? I was 27, 28. I just put my arms out and walked over the garden. Then I had an urge to dig. And I dug up the most amazing stuff. And it's still in my cabinet. We call it my cabinet of curiosities. Old earthenware pots, an Edwardian paperweight. So yeah, I've had success with dowsing. I've never really got into it. I've often toyed with getting into it, but the mediumship drew me more. what other modalities? Divination, dowsing, a bit of card reading, but not formally. Anything that's too formulaic in this puts me off. So I've reserved my formulaic side for computer coding and my medical work, the serious medical work. The rest of the stuff, I like to wing it. I mean, like I'm winging this discussion. So, you know, because that's when things flow. So when I do card reading, I won't do a formal spread. I'll just look at the image. I think, what's coming to mind? Could that mean something? I've got this theory of correspondences that, you know, everything's linked in the sort of holographic universe. So when you're presented with something, you can look at it and examine it, and that you could then extrapolate that to higher level. That's my excuse.
Thank you.
Anyway.
It's a very good answer. Thanks. Kristian.
So yeah, I mean, I was listening to what you were saying there when you were going down the different kinds of practical side of things that you have delved with, such as psychometry. So remote viewing, could you share a bit about your experiences with that?
Remote viewing, yeah, I'm not very good at remote viewing, unfortunately. The big problem with remote viewing is that we've done it. We've done it with my. First of all, you need to do it formally. In fact, the guy who published my book, Patrick Weege, I met him in America in Brooklyn when I went over there, and he knows. Is it McMonagle? Joe McMonagle? He was saying that they got all sorts of crazy stuff, like aliens on the moon and stuff like this, which was great, but they couldn't do anything with it, as far as we know. They may have done, but he said they couldn't test it. So with remote viewing, the good thing about remote viewing is that it's done formally, and then it can be formally tested, and you can compare. But the stuff we've done in our various groups hasn't been anything like that. If you're going to do remote viewing, it has to be done quite formally, and you have to sort of statistically analyze it and then see how it pans out. So I haven't really done that, to be honest. So not very good. I mean, I'm not a very good medium. I'm very enthusiastic, right? And I'll give it a go. And it's a bit hit and miss, but I'm like that with everything.
Well, I guess before it moves perhaps over to Karin, is that, do you see mediumship now gaining kind of more mainstream acceptance?
Well, it's certainly more acceptable than UFOs, that's for sure. I mean, if you say you're a medium, people will say, "Oh yeah, okay, fair enough." They might raise an eyebrow. I mean, I'll tell you the Laurie story in a minute. I may have told you this one. UFOs, no, maybe UFOs are getting better now. But if you mention you're interested in UFOs, people will just think you're crazy. So I've got to tell you about my Laurie story. So Laurie was a dentist. He's died now. He's in his 80s. And I was at a dinner party with given by a guy who was a healer, Charles. And his wife Reed said, "Ian, you sit next to Laurie because he's interested in the Anunnaki," and he goes on a bit. And I know you like UFOs, so you'll enjoy speaking to him. So I sat speaking to Laurie, and he looked at me very enthusiastic, saying, "Yeah, it's in the Bible. They enslaved humanity. They mined for gold. They did this and that." I said, "Yeah, Laurie, you could be right." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah. After all, I believe in UFOs." And he looked at me and said, "What? You believe in UFOs? Are you mad?" I mean, he just didn't link the Anunnaki with the idea that UFOs were there. So even though he believed that in the Bible it was there, and the older, he wouldn't accept the existence of UFOs. I've actually had arguments. There's a guy called Neil at a barbecue from 10 years back. I was talking to him about my interest in UFOs, and he walked out and he spoke. He didn't know it was my wife, and he said to my wife, "There's this guy there. He's a nut. He's going on about UFOs." She said, "That's my husband." So every time we get any of this disclosure stuff, I think of Neil, and I'm thinking, I'm going to find you, Neil. I'm going to email you when they disclose. So yeah, so mediumship's not. I would say certainly my patients, surprisingly, it really surprised me, were very positive about mediumship. In fact, one of the things, I mean, coming from a medical scientific background where this stuff is, it's just dismissed, like skeptical, and then giving these tentative messages to patients because I felt compelled to, and I was sure my career was going to go down the tubes, and they say, "Oh yeah, that's okay, doctor, thank you." Just accepting it as normal. I mean, I may have told you the story before. I had a complaint from a patient So this woman came to see me, and she had a swollen knee. So I examined her, diagnosed her, gave her a tube of Voltarol, and told her it would get better. She then walked out and complained to my practice manager. The complaint was that she'd seen Dr. Rubenstein. Her father-in-law had died 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't given her a message from her father-in-law, which typified, you know. So I'm lying in bed at night thinking, what am I doing to my career? I'm going to get thrown off the GMC. I'm going to get complaints, and yet the patients loved it. They thought it was quite normal. So yeah, that point changed my approach, because I then realized, as a doctor, I'd been speaking to patients in one language and they'd been speaking to me in a different language. And so what I understood then was that I completely misunderstood how people thought. People don't think in terms of cause and effect. I mean, they do, but not in the strict way that as doctors and scientists are trained. Actually, what they want is a story that makes sense to them. And that's really, really important with medicine. And that's one thing I gained from mediumship, is hearing the patient's story, what it means to them, what it means to their life. I never thought I'd actually gain that from mediumship, but I did.
Thank you. Karin, have you got another question? Oh, you need to unmute, my lovely.
Sorry. I've been regressed twice over the years, and one of the regressions that was really, I've never forgotten, is me being an abbess in a priory during the War of the Roses. Now, I have a love-hate relationship. I love the history of the church, but I don't like religion. Now, when I sat in circle, I wasn't very good, but one of my spirit guides was a nun, as you said, chatting about earlier. Is that spirit guide a past me, I wonder?
Now this is a debate I've had with my guides, right? Now, or with myself. So this is my thinking. No. What I've been told, and I've tried to sort of have a dialogue with myself, that we've got to think, and I'm not even sure this is right, but I'll give it anyway. This is an insight that I've had. You've got and this is actually, it also, I've read that subsequently, you know, Silver Birch, the famous spirit guide, talks about this as well. We've got to stop thinking of past lives as linear lives. The image that I find most useful, and it could be wrong, but I work with this, is of a diamond, with each facet being an individual autobiographical entity, a life. The diamond is who you really are, and you've got many facets. The diamond exists outside time and outside space. Time, space, and identity exist within each facet, and each facet is a part of the higher self, the greater you. So what's happening is, you can imagine light passing through the diamond and being refracted and being bent and then coming out different faces. Your life's work is to sort of hone each facet so that the light is refracted and bent into a harmonious way. And then so you're looking at this individual diamond with light rays coming and going from all sorts of directions, and then imagine that set amongst other diamonds with rays passing through, and then getting larger and larger at the higher levels of organization. And that's basically what God and the universe is all about. So our job as a diamond, as a facet, is to refract this light. So the light carries information, and in some cases, if a lot of light comes from one facet, it might come from another diamond or from another facet of your own diamond, then you might have a lot of memories bundled into your current life. Does that make sense?
It does. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So that, then you get past life memories. So it is you, but it's not your facet. So it depends how you identify. If you identify with the facet, you don't come back. If you identify with the whole diamond, you have a series of lives which are linked outside time. And linearly, you could say, yeah, well, that life came first in linear time, that life came second, but actually they're all interacting. I think F.W. Myers, you know, who formed the SPR, when he died, he came back and said, and I got this from Michael Tim, if you've ever read Michael Tim's stuff. Michael Tim's a very, very good correspondent. He's often on Facebook. He's written some very good articles. And F.W. Myers said that reincarnation is a very difficult subject. It's often misunderstood. And people get the wrong end of the stick. And a half-truth is actually worse than a lie. He said that I will never come back, but the life I've lived sets the path for another soul who will come and live this life as well. And that's the sort of Buddhist idea as well. But you've got to take into account all these amazing reincarnation stories. Like the one with the little kid who remembers being dying in the war when he was fighting the Japanese in the Pacific. Amazing stories. It was shown on the Netflix documentary. So you've got to take that into account. So somehow you have to fit it all together. So I vacillate. I mean, I like the idea of this diamond thing because it means I don't have to come back. And so what happens is maybe you die and then you realize that you're still there. I mean, spiritualism says we carry on as an individual. You've got individual survival. So you've got to factor that in because I've got evidence of individual survival from the mediumship I give, I think. So what happens is maybe you develop and then you realize there are other aspects of yourself. And then as time goes by, you discover other stuff. And then maybe you realize that you are the whole diamond. I don't know. But then you read some books where, I mean, the famous Brazilian spiritualist describes spirits looking at the TV set and then diving into the TV set and then coming back. I mean, the trouble is all of this stuff comes through the lens of our own preconception, our own culture, what we want. And they're just frameworks. I mean, I entertain these ideas, but I'm open to be called wrong. And, you only hang on to a hypothesis as long as it's useful. So, Karen,
thank you very much.
Don't know. That's what long-winded way of saying I don't know. But I'm having fun finding out, yeah.
Mike, over to you.
No, incredible. It's a very well spent hour considering these things. I'd like to take a slightly darker turn though, because we've talked a lot about the light and it's fascinating about light. But I was wondering whether you or any others have any association with perhaps darker things, maybe even just tricksterish elements. Yeah.
So I've got 3 laws of the paranormal. So Rubenstein's first law is it always ends with aliens. The second law is it will always wrong foot you, and the third law is you will always end. You always become a space cadet, and some people recover. So the second law is it always wrong foots you. I mean, this is something that's really important. The Trickster and the Paranormal. Who was the guy who wrote the book called The Trickster and the Paranormal?
Hansen, I think, was it?
Yeah. Charles P. Hansen, wasn't it? That's the guy. Yeah. It's inextricably linked to this. And this is fascinating. And why? If you look at the most famous mediums, Eusapia Palladino, shall we say, she had to be tied down so she didn't cheat. She used to say, tie me down, otherwise I'll cheat. And she had the most amazing phenomena, and yet she cheated. Colin Fry, I think, was caught cheating. Everybody is almost like it has to happen. And let's look at, let's expand it, because the first law of paranormal is it always ends with aliens, which means that whichever door you go in through, be it cryptids or ghosts, you're going to end up with aliens. It's all linked. We look at UFOs. You've got the whole circus there. I mean, you've had the clowns coming out of flying saucers. You've got the most weird stuff. I mean, we've got all sorts of weird stuff happening at the moment. What is it? And it almost seems to be that it's reflecting something of us. And I think the person who's onto something the most is Joshua Cutchin. Have you heard of Joshua Cutchin? He's written the book Ecology of Souls, which I'm trying to read at the moment, which is, it's a difficult read. But he looks at the link between UFOs and death. I mean, his point is that all of this is to do with the human consciousness and the soul's journey. And we need to take that into account. And we are tricksters. I mean, we are tricky. And maybe it's us fooling ourselves, or maybe the universe is just having fun with us. Maybe the universe has got a sense of humor. Maybe the universe is like us. We have a logical side, but we also have an artistic side. And maybe the trickster element is the artistic side of the universe that we're playing with. I don't know what to do with that. but I don't think we can ignore it. So the other question is it dark? Yeah, I mean, because we're dark. I mean, there are some dark things. The Enfield poltergeist got quite dark. But yeah, I've got a friend who's a devout Christian. He's a lovely guy. And when I started mentioning about the trickster element, he got very upset. He said, "Oh, it's satanic." I don't think it is satanic. I think it's just the universe will wrong foot you. And it keeps you agile. Just when you think you've nailed it, oh, okay, he thinks he's so clever. We'll give him this. So I think that's what's happening.
Brilliant, thank you. Are you okay? We're at an hour now, Ian. Are you okay if I run through a few more questions?
Yeah, I'm on a roll. Can I just say hello to Steve, Human, Phil, and Jackie, by the way? Nice to see you there.
Wonderful. So we have got a lot of questions that's coming through now. So we'll try and whiz through a few of them. And then maybe if the panel's got any more questions, we can go back and have a final roundup from the panel. Kristian sent me a private message from Joanna that came through. She's with someone called Nick, and they want to know, have you been out on any investigations? And if not, why not?
I have. I don't. Okay. So I joined when I first started opening up. I went to all sorts of places, but I should have put a notice up in my waiting room saying doctor wants patients to play with, because my patient Mark, who has been on a similar trajectory to me, he formed Spook Scenes Investigations. So I thought, oh, this is fun. I'll go out and go ghost hunting, and we were very lucky. We were allowed to. Through a contact of his in the Ministry of Defence, a friend of his, we were allowed to actually stake out the Salt Tower in the Tower of London. And I think we're the only group that were allowed to do that. Now, look, I'm very technical when it comes to computers, but I'm not the most technical people otherwise. And when you go onto these investigations, not casting any shade on people, but you get young men with technical stuff erecting equipment. There's wires everywhere. There's things and I just want to go in and just do. I don't want the equipment. I just want to be tuning in. But they loved it. They had the equipment. We had everything all over the place. And I'm in the Salt Tower, and I was speaking to one of the chief beefeater, and he told an interesting story. He said that because these beefeaters, they're all ex-servicemen. He'd come back from Afghanistan, and his wife was in Northampton. He was billeted in the, not his house. He now lives in a house, or lived in a house then, in the grounds, but he was in the barracks. And he said he woke up one night to find his bed floating in midair, being shaken. And he said he was more scared of that than anything he'd coped with in Afghanistan. So, and this guy was a big guy. So I totally believe that. Yeah, I mean, I had an experience of standing in the Salt Tower, and I just tuned in, and suddenly I found myself looking out on a scene where the courtyard was crowded, and there were like a bear on chains dancing, and there were lots of people, and the smells and everything, and I could see guards with knuckle bones, they chuck the knuckle bones like jacks, but they're knuckle bones. And I knew that they were guarding a Scottish king, and I knew nothing about that. When we looked at history, there was the Scottish king who'd been in prison there. So that's my experience. I am a member of the Ghost Club. I have been out on Ghost Club investigations. Problem I've got is I can't stand staying up late. I mean, as a doctor, I used to have to do like 72-hour shifts. I'm not kidding. And that really spoils you. You really love your sleep when you've done that. So I've decided that I just can't stay up late. So that's why I don't do those investigations. I don't like going I did get the chance recently to visit someone in Colchester who had a haunting. And it was some quite dark stuff going on there. And I had a chat with my wife, and she said, Ian, please don't go to these places. You don't know what you might pick up. And of course, there is the hitchhiker phenomenon. Now, as people are familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch and all the stuff there, and the people who went there, they ended up with lots of stuff. I think there's one guy who's still got something attached to him. And I'm not very good with clinging attachments, to be honest. I'm quite open. So I thought that's why I keep away from them, I think, really. Also, because I'm actually really want to improve my mediumship, actually. I've got to sort of get the gumption to go out on platform more, but it's really nerve-wracking.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
Our team is actually trying to set something up to come to London. I've been invited by a fellow writer to go and explore London Underground. And it's going to be in the daytime if
Oh,
you'd
right.
like to come and
Oh,
join
well,
us.
yeah, let me know about that. Yeah, fancy that.
Yeah, definitely. We'll set that one up. It should be around May time. Right, what's the next question? Rita Hook sent me a private direct message. I've been told by more than one medium that I'm psychic, and I'm not sure I am, but what is it that you can see, if you can, about other psychics that marks them out? In other words, what are people seeing that gives this away?
Yeah, I call it the buzz. Did you ever watch Highlander? Remember the Highlander? When they get the Highlander
quickening.
buzz, the
Yeah.
immortals know, yeah. I call it the buzz. There is something, and I don't know what it is. I remember I had this really interesting experience. So I'd come in from a busy surgery, and I was really knackered. And I remember thinking, I'm so tense. I'm gonna have a glass of whiskey. I don't drink whiskey. I had a glass of whiskey, and then the phone rang. It was my friend Louise's health visitor. She said, Ian, can you come round to Helen's house? Her son's got a poltergeist. I thought, okay, well, you have to pick me up. So we went round there. The son didn't have a poltergeist. He was just upset. But his mother said, when everything had calmed down, she said, Ian, I used to wake up as a kid, and there was this man standing at the foot of my bed. Would you mind coming across to my house, my mum's house, just across the road, seeing what you pick up? I did pick up something. I got quite a lot, actually. But as I came out of the house, I looked at Mother Pat and I said, you got Romany blood in you, haven't you? You're psychic. She said, yeah, how did you know that? And I didn't know. I said, I don't know. But I just knew that she was a Romany gypsy blood and that she was psychic. And it just came out. I didn't know where that came from, but it's certainly there. I can now tell people, but it's like I would say it's more of a feeling there than anywhere else. And you're not seeing anything. For me, I'm feeling it there. And that's all I can describe. It's one of the things about mediumship, it's quite interesting, is sensations. You'd always say, mediums say, I can see someone over your left shoulder or someone over your right shoulder. There's definitely, when you're giving messages or mediums, you get the messages are delivered in space. Now, whether or not they really are there, or whether or not it's your brain using space as much like this screen, right? I mean, Mike's right in the middle of my screen. I'm to his left, and Caroline's right to my left. Different on your screen. So my screen's got you all arranged in space. I suspect that when you get mediumship messages, your brain sorts it out and they arranges it in space. So you'll have somebody who will say, oh, if it's up there, it's the father's side. If it's up there, it's the mother's side. And then if it's a bit higher up, it's the... So in other words, we visually and spatially represent things. So a lot of it's feeling, but the feeling is in here. That's all I can say, really. But a lot of psychics can do it.
I love hearing your explanations of your thought process on how these things, because it gives a different perspective to our own thoughts that we would have to explain it away. So it's always nice to have something else that we could maybe say that that's the reasoning and that's why. So yeah, it's great hearing your explanations. Who have we got now? Tony Percy says, you mentioned the tunnel and the light and the taper thread. Have you seen the void in between?
Well, I was in the void in between. I was in the tunnel. I was the light. Yeah. As I said, I've got a big ego. So I was this little light on the end of this. So I was in the void. I didn't go into the light at the end of it. I don't know what that was, and I lost consciousness or don't remember what happened after that. The reason why I bring that up is we know that people who've had near-death experiences often come back with psychic gifts or powers or whatever you call it. And that may be one explanation why this happened to me, actually. Because after that, I had a few other things in my teenage years. And looking back at it, this thing has always been there in the background. And I've always actually been interested in it. I've always been open to it. I remember one of the first books I was read when I qualified, it was my first house job as a doctor, was Ian Curry's book, You Cannot Die. I remember reading that, which is a classic, actually. And that was quite interesting. I never knew really what to do with it. I mean, I think I've told the story about witnessing my friend's transfiguration when I was 19. My sister and I witnessed what was purportedly her spirit guide. It was absolute balm. I mean, it was amazing. I've never seen anything like it before or since. And that sat with me for years. I didn't know what to do with it. And I got a message with it. It was, mark this, no, there's more to life than meets the eye. One day you'll understand. But it took me 27, 30 years to actually work out what to do with it and where it fitted in. I think my sister and I had enough energy between us to enable this woman's spirit guide to manifest. Actually, that was Maurice Gross of Enfield Poltergeist told me that. I told him the story. He said, well, I think you and your sister are undeveloped mediums. I then confessed to him that I actually was training as a medium because I was a bit embarrassed to tell him. So I actually went to Maurice Gross's house about a year before he died. He played me the tapes, introduced me to his wife Betty. He's a lovely guy, very little, very short, big handlebar moustache.
Thank you. Panel, if you've got another question, just raise your hand. Kristian, do you want to unmute, my lovely?
Yeah, I was sat there typing away, but no, I might as well ask it out. So I'm very curious about one of the things you mentioned tonight. The way you're describing is I can picture it because I've got a very good, vivid imagery, sound, and sensation mind. Obviously, a lot of people have very vivid dreams, very vivid experiences, and we communicate with the power of story, as you've mentioned here. But what about those people who claim who don't have that ability? Those who appear not to have the ability to see three-dimensional shape, or those who have no visual or even sound capacity in their mental space.
Yeah.
Do you think these people are capable of mediumship if they don't have that kind of communication skill? Or
Well, it's very. I mean, there are certainly. I think most people who run psychic development circles will find someone who says, "I just don't get any images." And in fact, it's now known medically that there are some people who don't have an imagination. They can imagine, but not imaging. They don't have the imaging. They don't have a mind's eye.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. Yeah.
My mind's ear isn't that great. My mind's eye is very good, but still, I know mediums who don't have an imagery, but they're clairsentient. They feel things, and they work on bodily sensation. The best mediums, I have to say, are the ones who are clairaudient. If you've got a good clairaudient medium, then you're getting names and everything. They're very rare. I mean, I've had clairaudience on 2 occasions, so clear that I actually heard a voice. But that's all. With me, it's images. But when you're taught as me, you're taught to use all sensory modalities. But yeah, some people can't image, but they can still do it. But it's just they have to learn a different way. So in some people, there's clairsentience where you have body feelings. There's claircognizance where you just know. There's all your clairs. There's clairgustance, taste. I've had that once. I had a sweets taste in my mouth. That's very interesting. But for most people, because we're visual, a large part of our brain is devoted. We've got big eyes and we've got the visual cortex there. Most of us are visual. But I mean, I suppose if you've been blind, I mean, there is one medium I know. Is it Dominic Bogue? I think he's blind. So I don't know whether he images or not, but he's certainly a very good medium.
Oh, thank you very much. That's much appreciated.
Can I just come in with one more? I'm feeling like there's more and more questions coming out.
Keep going.
Yeah, and what your answer to Kristian there made me think a bit about, particularly mentioning taste. I remember hearing something about Emanuel Swedenborg having to almost avoid eating too much food to see entities or something. I was just wondering if there's any, and you mentioned whiskey earlier as well, so I was just wondering if there's any kind of association between those very material things that we take in and the ability.
Well, first, when you start, you're taught you shouldn't have a heavy meal before you do any mediumship because it sort of it sort of settles you more into the physical. So I used to avoid that. Now, obviously, you don't want to have alcohol, right? Or drug. I mean, I don't take drugs apart from a statin. You wouldn't really. Personally, I would keep off all that because you really want a clear mind. I mean, you're using your mind. You don't want it befuddled. But I mean, the guy who taught me, Keith Hudson, God rest his soul, he's passed on now. He was a famous drinker. He'd phone up, half cut in the inn at 8 o'clock, and he was so slurred, and then he'd come out with the most amazing message. He'd fall out with people, mainly because I wouldn't buy him a drink on his birthday because I didn't want to sort of make matters worse. He vowed he'd never speak to me. And then one day he phoned me up and said, Ian, yeah, I'm not talking to you, but they made me phone you, and here's your message. And he gave me the most amazing message. He was completely pissed out of his head, but he gave me the most amazing message, completely, spot on. He said, right, I'm going now. But luckily he forgot he didn't like me after that. So yeah, I mean, there's no real rules, and everybody's different. For me, I'm better off if I a little bit hungry, and it makes me sharper. But I'm like that when I'm doing my work. I mean, I'm one of these people who may not eat for like 24 hours, all that sort of stuff. I go to the gym and then sort of starve myself a bit, and I find that makes me sharp. Maybe I'm a shaman. Maybe that's what shamans do. Hey, I'm a suburban shaman. Yay!
That sounds good. Thank you.
I'm going to throw it out to the members. If there's anybody there that would like to ask a question and unmute yourself, please put your hand up. Hopefully I can see you in the picture. If I can't, Kristian, you'll help me to see anybody. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question? I can't see anyone at the moment.
No, yeah,
I have. Oh, go on then. Sorry. Yes, Bill, carry on.
Yes, Dr. Rubenstein.
Hi, Bill.
Do you ever find yourself, when you're working as a doctor, that information comes to you psychically that is helpful in diagnosing the patient's problem?
I try and avoid. Actually, it's interesting, but there's a very good point. When I first started with this along this field, I thought, well, I'm a doctor. I'm getting these psychic things. It's obviously healing. And I went to various healing centers, which I found very interesting. But I was told by my guys that we don't really want to work with you in that, because actually we've been with you all the time and you've got a healing guide. And actually what we want you to do is to concentrate more on the mediumship. That's what we want from you. So I don't use it as diagnosis. I mean, I call my job professional ice skating. I'm skating on thin ice professionally, aren't I, really? Doing this stuff in a consultation and then starting to use that in the consultation is getting dangerously close to what the GMC might think. Oh, we don't like this. I know one doctor who was actually struck off for it. But also, it just didn't work out for me. I mean, the guides caught me. They said they'd catch me if I took a leap of faith off the cliff, but it turned out they were giving me messages. I mean, I used to do a lot of acupuncture. I remember once I was, and some manipulation, hands-on stuff with patients. I remember I had a woman, I was just putting my hands on her back, and as I put my hands on her back, I saw this enormous salmon over her spine. I could see it, and I just said to her, "Why am I seeing this salmon?" And she said, and she actually flushed. You could see her whole body flush. She said, "I'm vegan, but I had salmon last night for the first time in 10 years." And that was pretty amazing. So that's a diagnosis. But I wouldn't use it for diagnosis. In fact, sometimes in our group, we'll do what they call scanning, body scanning, where you sort of look at someone and try and see what area is wrong. And my heart always sinks when that happens because I don't want to do that. That's my day job. And I can order a CT scan or MRI scan. And anyway, I don't know what to make of that. And there are some medical intuitives. I'm not one of them, actually. You know what? It's a hard bloody work to learn to be a doctor. To learn to take a history from a patient. It drove me mad for about a year. I had to struggle with that. I remember trying to clerk a patient. He had COPD and he was breathless. It took 3 hours for me to get history out of him. After, and he said, "For God's sake, dog, leave me alone." I was a medical student. It was hard work. So that's a skill that I've earned. And I think really, I don't really want to use my psychic stuff for that. If it happens, it happens. But I've been told I've got a healing guide and that she works with me anyway. The other thing about that is if you heal someone, and I believe it does happen, it could always be it was going to get better anyway. I'm on a personal journey here as well, and I want evidence. So I know what the naysayers are going to say, but when you give a message to someone like the frogs, and they say, "Oh my God, I've got frogs all over the place," or the other day I was sitting in a circle, and I said to this woman, "I'm seeing lots of egg boxes. Why have you got egg boxes?" She said, "Oh my God, I've got egg boxes at home, and I go to the farm and I fill them up." Then I saw her eating Angel Delight. And I don't think people eat Angel Delight anymore. She said, "Yeah, I have a packet every day." Stuff for that, for me, is good feedback. It's like when you're doing programming with modern computer programming. In the old days, you used to have punch cards. It used to take ages to get feedback. Now it's instant feedback. I like the instant feedback, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
So we get
So
it wrong.
do you ever do healing using the laying on of hands, either outside work or inside work?
No, I've done acupuncture. I have put hands on people when I felt moved to, but that's not really my not really my shtick, as we say.
Because you said you were interested in healing.
I think it's real. It's not my primary. I mean, as a healer, as a doctor, yes, generally healing. Giving a mediumship message to someone who's bereaved is incredibly healing. I mean, I've got one patient. She lost her mother, and she saw bereavement counselor after bereavement counselor. I brought her mother through. She'd gone from being bereft to knowing that she was in contact with her mother, and it came through in the most amazing way. We were both in tears when it came through. That to me is a form of healing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought I was heading towards hands-on physical healing, but no, they moved me into a different field. It's not my choice. I have to do what I'm told. I'm just the messenger.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Following on from that, Ian, I don't know if I told you earlier that I'm trained sports therapist, and I deal with humans and horses. Now, having hands-on and osteopathic, you get really close into that person and you're making that contact.
Yeah.
But with the horses, I found that I was ending up in tears quite a lot, and they emotionally dumped on me. And I don't say that I'm a psychic, but
No.
I do say I'm intuitive and I'm an empath.
Oh yeah. Listen, I mean,
The horses would just dump, and humans dump, and some patients have left my clinic in tears and they don't know why. It's just the release, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, you're doing physical. You will do that. Remember, emotions are stored in the body as well. I mean, we are spiritual, psychological, social, and physical beings, and there's a link at every different level. The emotions are often stored in the body. So when patients come in and say, "I've got a pain here, doctor," or "I've got a pain in my bum," I say, "Is life really a pain in the ass?" And then you get some very interesting stories. And remember the hairdressers. They got their hairs in people. They pick up a lot of stuff. And I don't think it's just because they're talking to their clients. They got their hands close by. They're picking up stuff, be it by electricity or I don't know, but they're picking up stuff.
Yeah, fabulous. We have a hand up. Steve, would you like to unmute yourself?
Oh, greetings.
Greetings.
Hello. I've got loads of questions, but I think the important one, it's about getting back to intuition. And what's your take about trying to bring these subjects more, because most of our society is very left brain, but it's trying to get to, I suppose I'm trying to, what you just, your last description, it's like metaphysics, to try and bring that structure into society, whereas because we've all got these latent faculties.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to bring it more into the arena of life rather than it just being fringed.
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, about metaphysics, I mean, the other thing is why are we here? So the thing I now ask my patients is, what do you think your mission is in life? And I say that, I mean, my theory is that life is an initiative test, and that we come here with a blank slate. We have to find our mission and then complete it. And that's the initiative test. That's what we have to do. So I ask my patient, "What's your mission?" And I think, "What do you mean mission?" I said, "Well, what have you come here to do?" And when you put it like that, then you go down some very interesting pathways, and often consider, and that's sort of metaphysics, isn't it? Really, what's life all about?
Yeah, that's it, to try and bring that
Yeah. But you've got to be, as a doctor, you've got to be careful. I mean, I'm not trying to push a line. I mean, I'm not really, I mean, if I would say, well, you've got to believe this, and you've got to be very delicate because you're dealing with people's beliefs,
Of
and I
course.
certainly wouldn't want to impress my beliefs, which are often confused anyway, onto my patients. What I like is like this: you engage a discussion with people and see what interesting directions you end up in. And that's what I like to do with my patients. I do that with everybody, but especially with my patients. It's just a shame that medicine is moved into a direction where it's very perfunctory and all done by pro forma. And anyway, that's a that thing that I feel sad about, but still.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Just before we round off, I have one more question for you, and it's a doozy. Karin has to go, but Karin, nice little wave from you. Thank you. Ian, this is the finishing question for us. I'm going to put you on the spot. You can say no if you don't want to. Do you have a message for anyone here tonight?
No, I don't. I'm not in that. When I'm in this frame of mind, I'm not in the psychic frame of mind, I'm afraid. So no,
I would have been killed if I didn't ask that private question that came through.
It's a different. This is very I'm projecting myself. I'm reaching within and trying to give my thoughts. It's a different thing when you're giving a message. Your brain has to be quiet. You don't project yourself. I know I put the me into mediumship, but actually the me has to step aside. You're getting the unadulterated me now. It's a bit much, quite frankly. Me has to go away, and then I have to pull in what I get, and it's a completely different frame of mind. I think the mediums here will recognize that.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, have enjoyed every minute of this panel. It's been an incredible first for us that I'm aware of on the webinars. It's inspired me to go and ask more questions. Yeah, Mike, Kristian, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we thank Ian?
No, ultimately, I was just going to say it's an excellent panel to do a different format to mix up how we do our general webinars where you have a presenter who comes on and says their piece. It's very good to change that format up. So perhaps this is something we should do on a regular basis, perhaps once a month or every 6 weeks. We'll have a panel, invite some of our people, perhaps the people we've just had on as our guests of the last 4 or 5 weeks to be the panel. That'd be a really interesting idea. But yeah, it'd be fantastic. So no, I've got no more questions. I've really enjoyed tonight. I've really enjoyed participating in what effectively has been an excellent panel of discussion and back and forth. So wonderful.
So Ian, shameless plug, tell people where they can get hold of you if they've got questions.
Well, I mean, my website is www.drianrubenstein.com. It's not a very good website. I haven't kept, and I've got a book. All proceeds go to charity, normally cancer charities. It's not a bestseller. It's a story. Mediums keep on saying there's another book to come, and I keep on thinking, I can't face it right now. I'm very busy at the moment. I'm still working. I've got a demented 97-year-old mother-in-law that my wife and I are trying to look after. So yeah, so that's me. It's nothing magic. It's just me, just plain old me. And yeah, I mean, I'm still the oldest fledgling in the country, so I'm going to be 70 this year. So about time I got my finger out. But nice to see you, especially Steve, and especially Phil and Jackie. Yeah. And yeah, maybe you contact me in May if you do this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't ever take mediums with me because we come from a scientific background when we investigate. But it would be nice to see if we could get this qualitative and quantitative to and maybe not prime you where you're going.
Yeah.
So you don't know what it is that you're doing. We're not going to be mean and like blindfold you or anything, but we'll meet you in a pub beforehand and have a little chat about where we're going, and then we can write something up, and I can put an article in Haunted magazine about it.
Right, yeah, about how Dr. Rubenstein picked up nothing.
I can change your name for the purpose of anonymity if you'd like.
No, just give it as it comes.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to everybody that's come here tonight. We've had an amazing turnout, really good number of people for you. So you've got a lot of people who are interested in hearing what you had to say, Ian.
It's been fun.
Thank you all so much. If you're around on Saturday,